Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schrader. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Today we have Vince Guzzo on the show. He is the founder and CEO of Cinemas Guzzo Group, Guzzo Construction, Guzzo Medical, Guzzo Hospitality. He's just a serial entrepreneur, very, very well known, particularly in the Montreal, Quebec area. He's received national attention in 2018 when he joined the cast of the CBC television business reality show Dragon's Den as one of the investor dragons in season 13 and 14. And regarding Cinemas Guzzo, that is the largest movie operator in all of Quebec with 141 screens and 10 locations, the third largest movie operator in all of Canada. His new cinema Megaplex Saint Jean 12 is currently being built. So without further ado, Vince Guzzo, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The reason why we got you on is because A, you're Vince Guzzo, you're well known in Canada, and you're just a really smart, accomplished entrepreneur, business person, human being. You've done a lot of great things, and I thought you could give some further insight into your industry, the movie theater space, how it's changed, and how the work from home movement has affected your space. So let's start with that. Let's start with movie theaters and the future of movie theaters post-pandemic. What are you seeing right now? Do people want to go back? What are your thoughts on the boom? If you just look at the stock prices of companies like Amazon with Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney with Disney Plus, all these at-home entertainment packages. What are your thoughts on those?
You know, over the years, I've been in this business since 1974 when my dad bought his first theater. So I'm well known in Montreal, Greater Montreal, Quebec, but I'm also known as that pain in the butt from Canada in LA because I'm the guy who pushed the studios to, remove clearances or remove zones and play more theaters and create competition amongst various exhibitors, which is something that you guys in the U.S. know very well. We in Canada only had really two big circuits who controlled 99% of that market. Now things have changed. So that's what, created going to the movies was more of an experience. Theaters were modernized about, I would say 20 years ago when we opened up the market. The same thing that occurred in the late 70s, early 80s with, VHS, and then in the 90s with, CDs and or DVDs. It's the same thing with the streaming platforms. I think that what's going to happen is people are going to start realizing that, watching movies at home is not really competing movie theaters. It's really competing TV. DVDs have done such a good job at hurting conventional TV that it's reality TV that brought TV back. So, when I see a Netflix, when I hear of Amazon Prime, what I'm thinking of is your kitchen. Right? We all have a kitchen at home and we all use it. And even though it's a lot cheaper to eat at home, we still all decide to go to the movies or go to a restaurant to have a bite because humans are social human beings, right? Where we're just, social beasts. We need to interchange with people. We need to communicate with people. And going to the movie theater is very awkward because I was speaking to a lot of public health directors during the pandemic, and I said to them, you do realize that going to the movies is really a distancing social event. And by that, what I meant was you can go to a 400-seat auditorium, with 200 people watching a horror picture. You're all going to scream at the same time. You're all going to get scared at the same time. But ultimately, none of you have really shaken hands. None of you have really had to talk to each other except for your immediate bubble, the people that you came to the movies with. Same thing with a comedy. We all laugh at the same time. We all, so we're experiencing a social event without necessarily having to exchange, touching each other or whatever. So ultimately, the movie business, has been pronounced dead at least half a dozen times, and yet it's still here, right? So, and I always find it funny when written media seems to want to condemn movie theaters very quickly. I mean, the New York Times loves to do it. The Wall Street Journal once in a while likes to do it and just say, movie theaters are never going to come back from this. The truth of the matter is you forbid something long enough and it becomes novel again. It becomes desirable again. The biggest problem the movie industry has overall isn't whether people will leave their homes to go to a movie theater. It's what movie will make people leave their homes to go be watched in a movie theater. So, if you have kids, and I have 5 of them, and my oldest is 23, and my youngest is 10. So I got a few, different generations there. And ultimately what you can see is that storytelling has to change. It has to evolve with the evolving demographic, right? So I remember when the last Jurassic Park came out, I was talking to an emergency doctor friend of mine, and he tells me, I'm at your theater. And I says, it's 32 degrees outside on a Saturday. What the hell are you doing at a movie theater? Why aren't you enjoying the sun? He goes, I went to watch Jurassic Park. Now, he's 64 years old. So he remembers the Jurassic Park of 1993, and that's the one that, got him hooked. And so the generation of today are not hooked by the same thing. Right? The best example I can give you is I was teasing James Cameron one day, and I was telling him, how do you feel when you're, the highest grossing picture at the time, got beat out for best picture from a movie called Hurt Locker, which happened to be his ex-wife's movie. He laughed and he says, well, I do have the 2 top movies, and she's nowhere near that top thing, so it's okay. I have no problem not having won. I have no problem not being appreciated by the Academy all the time. But ultimately, the discussion went further than that, and I asked him how he managed to get the number 1, number 2 movies back then. And his answer was, well, that they're both the same movies. And I says, what do you mean? Said, yeah, Titanic and Avatar. It's the same movie. And I, was a little stunned because I remember one being almost a period piece and the other one being, a very modern, very, CGI, full of CGI, right? So I'm not getting why they're the same movies. It's Romeo and Juliet. It's the forbidden love story. 2 different economic classes in Titanic, 2 different worlds in Avatar, because economic classes doesn't speak to the generation of Avatar. They don't understand the difference between rich and poor, because we've reduced that gap. So it's not as clear in North America. He said, so I had to make the class struggle different. So I made it a world struggle. Ultimately, it's a love story. And Titanic is nothing else but the background. And Avatar and the CGI is nothing else but the background. Ultimately, there's a love story. And so that got me to thinking, and that got me to realize that, I've been in this business now for almost 50 years, because my father bought the theater and I was 4 and I'm an only child and I hung around with him all the time. And so the struggle the movie industry has every 10 to 15 years is readapting what people want to see, but more than want to see, how they want to be told the story, how that story needs to be communicated to them. So, The Godfather, for example, when I showed that to my older kids, they looked at me and says, I don't get it. Like, why was this movie so amazing? Versus Gladiator, they caught it a little better. And then when it came to, Avengers, well, that they understood, that they really grasped the message. And so the issue when you see a new technology come out, like Netflix, let's call it, or streaming, and all of a sudden movie admissions seem to go down, well, it's not necessarily an issue that people are leaving movie theaters. is that this new technology is now offering a different way of telling the story. And because they're the latest thing on the market, they seem to tell it a little differently. And as much as, I disagree with Netflix's philosophy or business model, I do have to give them the credit that their, miniseries are amazing. Some of them are good, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. And so the art form of telling a story differently is where everybody needs to, step up their game in the movie business right now, in what I would call the real movie industry, where you go for an experience, per se. But I don't think, I don't think people are going to stop going to the movies. If people stop going to the movies, that means people should have stopped a long time ago going to Broadway or live theater, and they haven't stopped doing that. And only because you can listen to music on your iPad or on your computer doesn't mean you can or you will not go to live theaters, or to a live concert. In fact, Live Nation has managed to find the value in people going to these live performances. And 2 months of 2 months of lockdown didn't do anything to the movie industry negatively or positively. 14 months of lockdown has really helped the movie industry. And the evidence of that is very simple. Last year, when we reopened in my markets in July, we were at 10, 15% of business. This year, when we reopened at the end of May, and now, we're in early July, we already are at 52, 56. Even, last weekend with, 2 weekends ago, with Fast 9, we were at 68% of business, which means the fact that we were missed for 14 months means that people reappreciate it, saying, you know what, I really want to go to a movie. I really want to, and so I think what's going to happen as Black Widow comes out, as Suicide Squad comes out, and as, the Bonds of this world come out and all of that comes out, I think you're going to get the same reaction of what happened, in the Roaring 20s after Prohibition was lifted. All of a sudden, people are going to say, you know what? I stayed home enough. I've done enough home renovations. I now want to go to a movie, or I now want to go to, to a patio. I want to go to a restaurant. And people will socialize, maybe differently, but they will socialize. And so the movie industry is here to stay.
Yeah, I will say what you were talking about is very true for me. Like, at this point in time, if I'm going to go to a movie theater, it's going to be to see stuff blow up and big action scenes. Like, if it's just like a rom-com or a comedy, I'll watch that at home because, I need something big to justify to me to go out and have that experience. You're a serial entrepreneur, as we talked about. You see needs and fill needs, and you find, things that need to be done, and you solve them. How do you think, I've seen the movie theaters itself, like the inside, has evolved consistently over time. Can you talk about how you see and fill needs, but then also how you see the movie-going experience adapting in the coming years as well? Because, I noticed, it went from like cramped auditorium style, like you're in a classroom, or classroom or an auditorium at school, and now you've got like big plush chairs that recline and do all of that. So how is that experience going to change?
Well, so, one of the things that's going to change, and so there was a change in the movie industry that I would say the customer didn't even realize. We welcomed it, and I don't think we realized how negative that change was. And that change occurred roughly in about 2002. And it was a very symbolic year, because that year Warner Brothers, who normally released, 12 pictures a year, released 43 pictures that year. Now, 43 pictures, think about that. It's almost a picture a week. And what we hadn't realized is we thought, hey, it's great. The more pictures we get, the better it is. The more reasons customers will have to come back literally every week, if maybe not twice a week, to see movies. In reality, what had happened there is the studios had realized that if they took a movie and went straight to video with it, it only performed, or straight to DVD with it, it only performed, let's say, 5 out of 10. The minute they went to a movie theater, it gave sort of like a certification to the movie, right? Because the movie actually made it into brick and mortars, it meant it was a higher, it was like a THX certification or something. And all of a sudden they noticed that their movies were not performing at 5 anymore on DVD. They were actually performing at 7, 8, 9. So they all said, you know what? Let's just use the theaters as a marketing tool for our DVD releases. And all of a sudden, DVD sales skyrocketed from $1 billion to $5, $6, $7 billion a year. And so that extra money being generated by the studios now was being pumped back into making movies. The problem is that some of those movies did not deserve a theatrical window. I mean, those movies were straight to TV or straight to video movies. But because they only cost so little and it cost so little to release and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they were making more money off those movies than maybe risking by making $100 million picture. We didn't realize the negative that would come from that. And basically what happened is in 2014, we hit a brick wall where all of a sudden people were saying, it's just not worth going to the movies anymore because I'm no longer getting, 3 out of 4 movies that I like and one was a so-so. I'm actually getting 7 movies out of 10 that I feel where I didn't get my money's worth. And so now people started saying, well, if I got to watch that kind of a movie, let's point the finger to a known guy like sort of an Adam Sandler movie, well, it's not worth the same money as a movie called Avatar or Avengers. And plus, I can see Adam Sandler for $9.99 a month on Netflix. So the progress of more content does not mean more frequency or more people coming in. Because if the content's not, reaching its client, it's not reaching the people it's supposed to be talking to, it just doesn't help us. And in fact, it made people feel that they weren't getting their money's worth. When stadium seating came, well, that was a long time coming. In other words, AMC was the, sort of the originator of that kind of thinking, with the big stadium seating, bigger seats and whatever. We did the same in the Greater Montreal area. We only went one step further. The average movie theater seat is about 17, 18 inches. We went to 24 inches. We made it a first-class experience. Now somebody said, you know what, we're going to up it up a game, and we're going to bring it to the lazy boy kind of approach. So the only thing I can say about the lazy boys, because I don't have any in my theaters, and I'm totally against the whole lazy boy idea and the whole VIP concept, because I think going to the movies is like graffiti art. It's street. It's for everybody. It shouldn't be up to $25, and your sliders shouldn't cost you $30. Because the truth of the matter is, you shouldn't be there for the sliders. You should be there for the movie, and the popcorn and the arcades and all that. That's complimentary to the experience of going there with a family and so forth and so forth. The other thing is, I'm not a big fan of, people drinking in movie theaters. I think, most people drink responsibly, but you need one guy to not drink responsibly, and then it becomes a problem for the whole auditorium, because then he becomes a bit of an ass, and he starts, talking and doing whatever he does in an auditorium. So there's progress that we're not going to accept to go. But for example, we brought in 9 IMAX theaters. So Greater Montreal probably has the highest concentration of IMAX movie theaters. Right. So, and that's important because that's a different experience. That's a bigger, more immersive experience. The 3D in the IMAX screens is to die for. It's amazing. But even the 3D was damaged, in its reputation. Why? Because, as movie producers will tell you, or movie directors will tell you, if you're making a movie for it to ultimately be seen in a 3D concept, that means you're filming differently. That means that when I'm throwing the ball, I'm not throwing it from left to right, I'm throwing it from front to back. So now you see the 3D effect. The problem is some of the studio guys decided they were going to take advantage and capitalize on the 3D, novelty approach, and they took all of these 2D movies they were doing, and they paid an extra few bucks, and they got the movie just done in 3D as the effect. But because if you film a movie for a regular size screen, and then all you want to do is stretch it, digital, allows you to do that. But you're not getting the IMAX experience, right? So if you're filming the movie in IMAX with the IMAX projectors, cameras, you get the experience that IMAX was meant to give you, a more immersive, a more full package. And I think it's important that we realize that if you're going to go to a movie theater, first and foremost, what you're looking for is the content. You're going to go to the movies to watch a movie. It's got to be an event, right? So I used to always like to say, if I build the nicest mousetrap in the world, if I don't have the right piece of cheese in there, I'm not going to get, I'm not going to get any mice. So the cheese is actually the movie. It's the storytelling. It's the, the big budget movie. And we've seen that even some big budget movies flop. Cruella is a good example of a movie that flopped. What was the other one? Mulan. As much as Disney wants to tell us, oh, it was great, everybody loved it. Yeah, sure. The movie didn't make any money in September when it was launched on Disney Plus. Right? They may have sold and forced people to sign up to 12 months worth of Disney Plus, but ultimately the movie was not a big draw. So innovation is great, but ultimately, once you've given a 25 inch wide seat, once you've gone to that 70-foot screen, once you've put in, the latest Dolby, at the end of the day, the real distinguishing factor is going to remain the movie. If it's a movie I want to see, I'm going to go to the movies. If not, I won't. It's a bit the same thing. There's a parallel to be made with restaurants. There's a lot of pizza restaurants in the world. Some work, some don't. Why? Some of the ones that work the most have the ugliest decor. They're not necessarily the hippest places. But man, the food's good, and people want to go there. Versus you've got the coolest places in the world to go, but food's no good. So you'll go once in a while just for the sake of it. And so I would tell you on a technical level, the movie industry has pretty much capped itself. We have modernized. We have, so I don't think the experience is going to change physically anymore. I think, can 3D be perfected to make it almost, virtual and almost like it's floating in front of you? Maybe. We're going to have to increase a lot of light source over there. But, we're putting in laser projectors now instead of just digital projectors. Great. So, that'll save us a lot of money. It'll give an even better screen. But ultimately, it's about the story. And so the movie industry is a content game, and we're just the box to show that content in.
One thing, Vince, you talked a lot about the story and the content is going to win. But I'll tell you, with me, and I'm sure with Adam even more so than me, it's about the pricing. So Adam's got 4 kids. If he wanted to take a family outing with his wife and 4 kids, we're talking at least nowadays. I haven't gone to a movie theater in 2 years, I think.
We went to the movies a little bit before the pandemic, got tickets and popcorn, and our kids split 2 drinks, and it was over $100.
Yeah, so the point that I'm making, and that was before the pandemic, the point that I'm making here is I know, and you can give some insight into this because you hire employees, and Canada's very different from the United States, but here in the United States, we can't even get people to work at McDonald's. And so McDonald's, Chipotle, Taco Bell, they've all raised wages. Now, if you work at Chipotle, I think the starting salary or the starting wage is $13 an hour. No, sorry, it's $15.
What's your minimum? What's your minimum wage?
The minimum wage. I live in Florida. The Florida minimum wage is about $9 an hour in Florida. It's like $8.65. So let's just say $9 an hour.
The federal minimum wage is $7.25.
Right, and so what I'm saying is to fill those positions, at least in the restaurant space, and I'm assuming the movie industry is going through a similar problem where they're having trouble filling, getting people to sell tickets and work the concessions. If you're going to have to pay them $2 an hour, $3 an hour extra from what you had to pay them a year and a half ago, aren't ticket prices going to go up, and how are people going to be able to afford that? I can afford it, I just wouldn't want to pay.
Well, right, but so this is an issue. So now you're opening up two cans of worms, and I'll answer one, and then I'll try and answer the second one. The first one is going to the movies an expensive experience? Now, if Adam went to, a movie for people, and he went to, let's call it a conventional movie theater, not a VIP, and it cost him $100, you can imagine what it would have cost him if he went to a VIP theater, right? So you have now one of the reasons why I don't think escalation of prices and escalation of luxury is the way to go to attract more people to movie theaters, because people are just going to say, well, now it becomes even more expensive, because now instead of paying $12 to go to movies, I'm paying, $18.95, or I'm paying $25 because it's a VIP and I've got this, somebody coming to bring me my sliders. But the sliders aren't costing you $5, which is, for example, the price of a large popcorn. The sliders are costing you $12.50, or they're costing you $15. So all of a sudden, your bill at the end of the day is going to go way up. The time of entertainment is going to be roughly the same. It's going to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. So that's where the VIP problem is. And then the real problem on the VIP is the business model doesn't work. And what I mean by that is there are not enough people in any market. Maybe LA, maybe the only one. Maybe, Wilshire Boulevard, maybe one of the rare places where a VIP theater could have enough people at a price point that they don't care if they're spending $50 a person to go watch a movie, because they're all either, the LA Lakers, or they're all movie stars. So that's a class by themselves. But would people do that on a regular basis? We said no, and that's why we stayed away from. The other problem is when you build a VIP theater, it costs exactly the same price as if you were building an auditorium for 400 seats, because those seats take way more space and they cost 4 times the price. So instead of saying a 400 seat auditorium, you'd fit about 130, 140 VIP seats. Now the problem is that when you're selling out a 400 seat auditorium at $10, or call it $10. Now you do the math, how much you've got to charge to get 133 people to be sold out. And you've got to do that just as often as when you got the 400 seat auditorium. The problem is that the numbers just don't work. And that's why everybody's trying to make it work, but it's really not working. When it comes now to the cost of operating theaters, I think there's going to be a readjustment. I think, cost of rentals, if you're not owning the property, and cost of leases will be adjusted. I think that, COVID has sent a message to all landlords. You've got a choice. You either drop your cost of rental for a movie theater, or the theaters will just go bust and walk away. It's a great opportunity for walkaways from. In my case, I own 50%. Yeah, so in my case, I have, let's say, 10 locations. Out of the 10 locations, I own 5 of the locations, and 5 of them are on a rental basis. And the only reason why that is because there comes a point where you want to become a little more capital efficient, and you can build more theaters if you're only leasing the premises versus having to build the brick and mortars, own the land, right? It's a question
or like
of
a mall.
Long term,
want to buy an entire
or a mall. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. See, even though I've done that, so during COVID, I bought an entire mall where one of my theaters was in, and it was an opportunity, and I took the opportunity. Now, that to say, ultimately, the movie theaters who have survived many of the crises that they've gone through are the ones that own the real estate. Because when you get to a company like AMC or Regal, you've basically got no hard asset. What you've really got is seats, screens, projectors. Most of those are on equipment leases. And then you've got property leases. And then all of a sudden, all you're doing is you're really financing cash flow. The problem is that as inflation went up, The cost of leasing went up. The cost of equipment went up. Remember, a lot of people don't realize this. When we used to put 35 millimeter films, a 35 millimeter projector would cost me $13,000. A digital projector for the same auditorium cost me $100,000. That up cost had to save me money somewhere. It didn't. Ultimately, it saved the studios a lot of money, but not the movie exhibitors. So ultimately, what really happens is everything's gone up. If you look at the average movie price, if you include in that general admission, call it Tuesday night special, Wednesday night special, matinee pricing, Costco coupons, or all kinds of things that, many exhibitors do across the board to try and attract customers, you'll realize that movie theater tickets have not actually gone up as much as just regular inflation. There's things that have cost a lot more than the cost of going to the movies. And we've tried to compensate by what? By doing on-screen advertising. As annoying as it may be, that on-screen advertising is actually helping to keep ticket prices lower than they should really be, right? I mean, if we would have inflation movie tickets from the 70s till today, we should have been at $25 a ticket, but we're not, right? We're on an average anywhere between $10 and $12 for general admission. So while the experience is expensive, if you put it in perspective, it's actually not that expensive, because if you actually took the same 2 adults and 2 kids to another form of entertainment, it would probably cost you a lot more. Even if you just took them to a Palladium or to one of those arcades, in an hour and a half, your kids would spend a lot more money, right? And so, yes, it's expensive. I'm not going to deny that going to the movies and it's $100, you feel, well, I'll just stay home and watch it at home. Yeah, but I can tell you that when I watched Wonder Woman 1984 at home, none of my kids finished watching the movie. When I then called Warner Brothers and I got them to give me a DCP and played it in one of my theaters just for us, they all watched it, and that was cool. And now it was an immersive experience. And I have a 75-inch TV at home, and and that's still not good enough for the kids. So ultimately, yes, you pay for an experience, right? I mean, going to the movies is relatively cheap, but only once you compare it to other stuff.
I will say, whenever I watched Wonder Woman 84, I almost didn't finish the movie either, but that was for different reasons. This may or may not be on the movie line. Where did you get the nickname Mr. Sunshine?
A long, long time ago, an attorney of mine once said to a few people, he says, Vince is like the sun. You want him in the room because he lights up the whole room, and he just, everybody, it's a real experience when Vince walks into the room. But the problem is that if you rub him the wrong way, he's like the sun. He'll give you a sunburn and you'll never forget it. Right. And so it's that duality of my personality. I can be your best friend, but if you cross me, or if in any way, there's a sign of disloyalty or whatever, or if you're trying to get the upper hand against me or something, chances are, I will burn you. And so it's that almost that duality of, like I said, the sun, where you want the sun, you need the vitamin D, but you stick around in the sun too much, or you overexpose yourself to the sun, you get a sunburn. It can hurt. So that nickname stuck because of a lawyer.
Regarding the pricing again and inflation, has Canada experienced the same problems that the United States is experiencing as far as job openings, people not wanting to go back to work, largely due to stimulus and the handouts that the government gave? Is that a problem? And has that been a problem? And has that affected the movie theater space? Because I'm sure it's affected that space here in the United States.
Well, yeah, so I would tell you more in Canada than in the U.S. and because our stimulus package was basically we were giving everybody $2,000 a month to stay home. So everybody. You can imagine Everybody. I didn't get it, but for example, I have friends that are just as well off as I am, whose kids asked and they got it. Right? So you've got 17-year-old kids who says, I can't go work because of you. So, and because the government didn't want to say, well, how much were you making? Only 300, so you get 300. They said 500 for everybody. So everybody got $2,000. And then the government realized that wasn't the greatest idea. So let me try and find a way to get people back to work. So it basically said, you can still all get $2,000 a month and you can still go work, but you just can't make more than $200 a week. So now what you've got is you've got a lot of students, part-time students during the summer who all want to work in movie theaters, but they're telling you ahead of time. If I was willing to work and make $400 a week regularly during the summer, I now only want to make $199 so that I will never make more than $1,000 a month. And therefore I'll be good to get my $2,000 freebie a month. And so that's created, I would tell you, more of an issue in my restaurants than it has in the movie theater space, because we can actually accommodate you only working for $200 a week when you're a part-time student. You're whether you're an usher, a candy girl, or a ticket box office ticket salesperson. When it comes to the restaurants, it's a bit more of a problem because it's not only the salary you make, it's also the tips you make. So now you have a problem because you can get, a waiter can make $200 a tip in one day in a restaurant. So all of a sudden he's saying, well, the $200 a tip plus this. So now I've got to work but not declare my income. So now I'm having a problem because now I'm actually frauding the government. So I don't want to go there. So a lot of those people have just said, you know what? I've been cooped up the whole winter. We weren't allowed to do things. I'll take the next 3 months to enjoy it till September comes. And then that stimulus package should disappear. But right now, it doesn't look like it's going to disappear. I have a feeling that our prime minister is going to call an election and he's going to extend the stimulus package till the end of December, and then he's going to blame the opposition for trying to oppose that stimulus package, and then he'll tell people, if you want to make another $6,000 for another 3 months, you got to vote me in, because if you vote the other guy in, you're not going to get it. And so he's going to win another election. So he's basically bought himself the election. So there is a problem, but there's still not a problem as there is, for example, as the examples you gave at McDonald's or whatever. Then you also have to remember that working in a movie theater is way different and way less stressful and way less abusive than working in a restaurant. Let me tell you. I mean, I own restaurants, and and my staff's paid more than minimum wage in those restaurants because of the abuse that they go through. Believe it or not, I mean, people are not the nicest people when they go to restaurants.
Yeah, well, it's here in the United States, and I'm sure you're aware of this. Like, for example, my landscaping hasn't been done in 7 months because the landscaping companies, their people, the employees, there's no reason. They'll temporarily work. Like you said, these kids can work until they make $199, and then they're like, hey, I need to quit because. And that's what's happening here in the United States. They'll come work for 4 days, collect something, and then quit on the job. Literally walk off the job and quit so they can continue. And so the companies, as you've noticed, I don't know about AMC and the movie theaters, but Chipotle, McDonald's, I've been following them closely because I own stock in those companies. And Chipotle raised their wage to $15 an hour. McDonald's, where I am in Florida, raised their wages $12 to $13 an hour. And they were paying $9 an hour a year and a half ago. In 2019, working at McDonald's, you were getting paid $9 an hour. Working at Chipotle, you were maybe making $10 an hour. And so that certainly affects margins as well.
Well, not only that, and I think everybody's got to remember, look, I'm not necessarily, I'm not the most versed in U.S. politics, but, because you are our largest trading partner, let's say I make sure to be informed, of U.S. policies, but, and every once in a while, look, we can say whatever we want about Donald Trump as a president, but it was a little concerning to me when you had a president, Biden, mock people and almost say like, "Hey, guess what, guys? Pay people more." Ha ha ha. As if it's easy to say that. No, but I mean, it's not very. Let's put it this way. I miss the days of when presidents were presidential, right? I miss the Ronald Reagans. I miss the Gerald Fords. I miss the people. They were not. They may not have always agreed with their policies, but you know what? They were respectful at a certain sense, at a certain level. But to sort of like talk to, corporate America as if, they're all a bunch of thieves and they're purposely not paying people, right? I think politicians need to realize that it's fine and dandy to play to the masses, but ultimately, if labor costs, for example, in the restaurant business, labor usually represents about a third of your cost of operation. If a third of your cost of operation goes up, it triggers an inflationary move to the cost of the goods that you're going to sell. So the fact that, salaries went from $10 to $12 may sound great short term, but long term inflation will kick in. People will pay more for food, and then your $12 will be equal to
crazy.
the same buying power of your $10.
Yeah, well, I was going to say housing. A lot of people thought, oh, I'm getting this $4 an hour raise. I can finally live the American dream and buy that house. And now those people have been priced out of the housing market. And I heard in Canada, the housing market is even wilder. I don't want to say worse, but it's wilder because of how much the values have gone up. But also, look, what you said, the whole politicians coming in and saying, oh, just pay your people more, or, corporate America is bad, or the corporations are bad. I think it's only one side of the political spectrum. It's only one side that keeps saying that. And we had a guest on our show, and you and I mean, we're both business. You're much, much bigger than me. I'm just a small businessman. But you and I we understand this. We speak the same language. And we had this guest on the show who said what you said. Oh, yeah, just pay your people more. And I said, well, I can't afford that. I'm going to have to, find ways to cut costs and do this and do that. And he said, well, you're part of the problem. No solution. No, you're just part of the problem. And again,
yeah, but ultimately, look, I'll tell you something that I said not too long ago. I said to somebody, they said, Mr. Guzzo, you're a conservative, and I said, which would be the equivalent of a Republican in the U.S. And I said, well, yeah. And they said to me, so you're like against government spending? And I said, no, I'm against government waste. See, I have no problem with government spending. What I don't like is the waste that goes along with some of the essential spending. And you have to sort of realize, when taxation and, income tax and the whole taxation principle came in, I don't think anybody, look, and there's always an exception to the rule, but I would tell you most business people would be willing to pay their fair share of taxes if they felt and they knew that there was a true benefit either to them, to their communities, to society in general, to the world population. In other words, no business person wants civil unrest, and poverty creates civil unrest. So nobody wants that. But what no businessman wants is for him to be overly taxed so that somebody could build or pay himself or whatever, and still people are underserviced, or still people are under, appreciated, et cetera, et cetera. And the real problem is there. The problem is ultimately, nobody says it that way, but that's the way we should be saying it is, look, the real problem is people are finding ways to offshore their money. Why? Because they feel that if they do pay the income tax that they're being charged, A, they feel they're being overcharged, and B, they feel that whatever they are being overcharged isn't really giving a benefit back, right? So it's a really simple economic analysis of cost benefit. What's the cost and what's the benefit? So they're seeing the cost because that we know what it is, but I'm not seeing the benefit. Show me the benefit. And I can guarantee you that we're all humans, and as much as some of us could be more greedy than others, ultimately, we all are willing to pay for a benefit. So why are people offshoring their money? Why are people, opening subsidiaries in tax-free Ireland versus, well, there's a reason for it. It's because they feel that if they paid that extra money, it would just be wasted. It wouldn't be really going back to help society or for example, we see it in Canada. We have, free healthcare. Well, I don't know why we call it free healthcare. I mean, we're all overtaxed on our income tax. We're all overpaying taxes, and all of that goes to subsidize a Medicare system that's then called free. But ultimately, you do realize that at least in my province or my state, my business was shut down because the hospitals could not take the flow of patients coming in from COVID.
Yeah.
And that's where I, posted something on social media that said, stop closing my business down because you don't know how to manage yours. I mean, was it a surprise that our healthcare system is as deficient as yours is? Ours is public, yours is private. They're still both as deficient. They're still both not servicing the people adequately. So we've got to find a solution, right? So
in your case, you guys, even before the pandemic, you got to wait a year just to go see. You have a problem with your knee. You got to wait a year.
Oh, Naresh, that's not even true. I mean, you look at elective surgery time. You look at elective surgery times in the U.S. versus elective surgery times in other countries that have nationalized health care, and it's all roughly the same amount of time. If you need service
in Canada, let's ask the Canadian. So if you want to go in for your checkup, let me
help both you. Yeah. No, but let me help you guys on this argument. I once donated an imaging machine to a hospital under the condition that the old imaging machine still be used and still be, in operation. It took less than a month for me to get a call from our Minister of Health, from our state, to tell me, hey, buddy, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? I didn't do anything. I just donated a hell of an imaging machine. Like, why are you gonna give me for that? Like, what did I do wrong? He goes, no. Why did you tell him to keep the other machine going? Well, because why would I waste that machine? It's still good. It's just not as perfect as this one. So this one is for the ultra sophisticated scans we need to do, and the other one is for the other, I call it the more common scans. Right? That was and he says, yeah, I know, but you're not understanding. Imaging is the way we funnel our medical budgets. So what are you talking about? Well, see, Vince, if I can't get you a scan, if I can't get your imaging, if I can't get your results, I can't treat you. So you got to wait. So as long as I make you wait for your testing, I'm good. I don't have to treat you. I don't have to spend the money. But wait up a minute. You're making people purposely wait because you don't want to spend the money on a result. So whatever they have may worsen. And then when you do finally have to treat them, you're treating something that's worse. Yeah, I know, but we don't have the money. Why don't you have the money? Like, why is it that you're not being efficient? What is it that you're not doing right? Oh, and let me give you an example of what they were not doing right. So our Premier just announced that he's going to spend $12 billion to create an underground tunnel to go from one island to another piece, to mainland, let's call it. $12 billion. That tunnel will only be able to take 2,500 cars a day. Do the math. That thing's got to last 75 years to break even on it. There's no tunnel that's going to last 75 years without huge repairs. But nobody's doing the cost-benefit analysis. What somebody's saying is, we're going to spend $12 billion. We're going to look like we're the best people in the world because we created jobs. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Yeah, but you're creating an infrastructure which you don't need. What we should have done, instead of spending $1 billion on marijuana ads and on alcohol ads during 14 months of pandemic, what we should have done is invested that money in maybe building a hospital, maybe building a temporary hospital, maybe building anything we want to try and alleviate the problem that's there now. A lot of people don't realize, and I want people to, I want your listeners to understand this because it's very important. When somebody asked me, how much money did you lose the last 12 months with all the theaters being closed and everything? I said, I took a $12 million hit to my cash flow. So they said, wow, that's big number. Yeah. And then some of the listeners or some of the people commented on social media and said, what do I care? He's rich. He can afford it. Doesn't concern me. Well, let me correct everybody. I lost $12 million. That means I take a $12 million hit. No, that's right. So if I lose $12 million, that means I have a $12 million credit going forward on my income tax, which means I will not be paying income tax for the next 2-3 years, which means the money you think you were going to get to pay for those services you think you required, they ain't coming in from me, man. So if you sit down and now you realize that when corporations lose huge amounts of money because of bad political decisions, it affects us all because it affects the amount of tax dollars being collected. Every restaurant that was closed and did not sell food, that means they didn't charge sales tax. That sales tax didn't go to the state, didn't go to the government. And the truth of the matter is, it's not true that by closing the whole world down for 14 months, life was still beautiful and everybody still, no. The truth of the matter is, governments didn't make as much money. Now, they got lucky because by not having to do any of the surgeries, by not having to do all of the other stuff they had to do in healthcare, because all they had to take care of was COVID, yes, they did save money. But now they have a backlog of 200% of surgeries, which they're going to have to do. Right? So people need to understand that the wealthy, the successful people, they're not always the enemy. Yes, some of them can be, but they're not always the enemy. There's not always a conspiracy theory. I like to say, we don't all get together on a Saturday night and have a call and say, okay, we're going to drop, we're going to make sure average, citizens don't make any money this year. Nobody makes that call. Everybody needs to realize that we are, whether we like it or not, attached to the hip, one to the other. And so if Amazon were to disappear from the face of the earth, it affects a whole bunch of suppliers of Amazon. It affects a whole bunch of people, right? And as we pushed things internationally to be produced abroad, we lost entry-level jobs. We lost jobs that were being taken by Canadians or Americans to produce goods that we consumed, right? And so the problem is, but it's cheaper elsewhere. I understand it may be cheaper elsewhere, but the guy that's not working anymore because I moved my plant from, New York or from the U.S. to China, well, who's paying for him now that he doesn't have a job? And it's not true that the U.S. is going to have 350 million engineers and 350 million accountants and so forth and so forth. I mean, it's impossible. And the truth of the matter is, do we really want to be dependent on other countries for our basic needs? And should we not be using our own people, putting them at work to get, even if it costs us a few pennies more, to get our economy rolling? So, an old Jewish friend of mine would always say to me before he passed away, charity starts at home. Take care of yourselves first. Once you've done that, it's easier to go out and help other people. Right? So Sanders is a great guy. It's easy to be as generous as he is when you're a billionaire.
Yeah. And I'll just mention, this is a study from the Fraser Institute saying that it takes 22 weeks in Canada on average, to get an appointment in an orthopedic surgery. It takes approximately 30 34 weeks, or sorry, 39 weeks for an orthopedic surgery. But look, personally, my wife is a doctor, and we just, or really I should say just for fun, I was like, let's just see what your schedule would be like if we moved to Canada. And the pay is good for doctors there, but the what you do outside of working, it's nothing, because you are constantly working. There is no 2 days off on weekends. There's so many patients who you have to get to, at least in her specialty, that yes, she would make a very good living, and even better living than what she currently makes. And this is across the board for most medical specialties. But what's the point if you're not able to at least enjoy that money? If you're not even able to come home and spend time and have time to yourself, there's not a whole lot of point. And so anyway, that's yeah.
No, but and you're right. And I think, look, one of the best examples that I always give to try and explain to people that there's no such thing as black or white. You got to find the right center point between the left and the right. Right? Too much to the right, you got some issues. Too much to the left, you got other issues. So you got to get somewhere in the middle. The best example I always give is oil. Right? You got two camps with oil: people who love oil and people who can't stand oil. The problem is the people who love oil aren't taking the time to explain properly, and the people that hate oil are doing nothing else but trashing oil and not even realizing what oil really is. Meaning, when we think of oil, we think of cars, we think of air pollution. And I always like to tell people, wait up. First of all, you do realize that a car isn't just a car. It's freedom of mobility. The car represents something. It represents I can go from point A to point B without having to wait for a bus, or without having to cater to somebody else doing me the favor for money or whatever to drive me from point A to point B. So it's a question of personal liberty. That's one thing. Now, you do realize that if you're sitting in a movie theater on a lazy boy or on a regular movie theater seat, that foam is made from petroleum extracts. The vinyl that covers it needs petroleum extracts. The shovel you use that's made out of PVC, that's made from petroleum extracts. The glass that you think is so important, instead of using plastic, for the bottle, to melt the sand to convert into glass needs oil, because you got to burn it at high end, and an electrical can't do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So does that mean we close our eyes and we don't take care of the environment? No. But what it means is, why don't both sides really say the full story instead of trying to manipulate the center, who is a little confused on what side to take? And it's the same thing. I always like when I hear the U.S. guys say that Canada has a better system than the U.S. does. But yet, when my father had to get surgery, it was a 9-month wait, not for surgery, for another test to see how his cancer evolved. Versus when I told him, but wait up, if I take my father, put him on a first-class plane, fly him to L.A., go to a first-class rate hotel. Not hotel, hospital.
He's in and out.
And I get the surgery. What do you think that's going to? I go, what do you think that's going to cost me? And he gave me a number, and I said, and what if I wrote you a donation check to your hospital for that amount? Would you get the surgery done? 2 weeks later, surgery was done. So let's get something clear. There's amazing things about public health care, and I think it's important. But there's also something to say, hey, I would always tell people, why don't you charge me 4 times what it costs to pass in front of the line? Take the extra money I paid you and buy yourself more doctors, buy yourself more facilities, so that now you can treat more people with the excess money that I had to give you because I wanted to be front of the line. In other words, there is an advantage in actually allowing people, if you charge excessively more, the right to bump the line. It doesn't look fair, Doesn't sound fair off the bat. But if you think about it and you realize that, hey, something that would normally cost us $5,000, we'll let you do it before everybody else. We'll let you bump the line for $50,000. You'd be surprised how many people would write a check for $50,000 to get their cancer removed right away.
Good. At least here in the United, that's for any
Yeah.
good. If you want to fly first class, you pay 2 to 3 times the price.
Pay more,
and you get
That's
first
right.
class. I mean, not everyone's entitled to first class. If you want to drive the Lamborghini instead of the Toyota, you pay 10 times the amount or 20 times the amount.
Right. And right. And let's be honest. In the airline business, the guys who are paying first class and business class are indirectly subsidizing that whole plane.
Yeah.
And that's why, economy could be the price it is. Because if you treated everybody equally, like a wonderful, beautiful communist socialist system, nobody would be happy. You'd all be paying too much and nobody would fly. And then you'd have half the flights. So, like I said, there's a balance to go get. And it's important. And I would encourage people to stop bitching about government spending and start bitching about government waste. Because that's what's the problem. In other words, our government, instead of giving $2,000 per person to make him stay home, could have subsidized my labor force, could have told me, I will pay you 100% of whatever you pay in salaries to non-administrators. So now I would almost keep my labor force going because it's 100% subsidized. That would have cost less than paying $2,000 per person to stay home. And today I wouldn't have had the problem of telling people, come back to work. By the way, you're still on my payroll. I'm paying you 100%. Right? So now you're working from home or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a way of doing things to get a better result. With the same intention, but a better result. That's where I think we're not doing the job right. So, in all fairness, I can't say this about the U.S., but I can say this about Canada. We don't pay our politicians enough. But thank God we don't, because the guys that we do have, they're not worth more money than what we're giving. But if you want to attract the best, what do? You pay a little more. So the same principle Biden said, pay more. Okay. Pay more and you'll get better politicians. Pay more and you'll get more intelligent politicians. I mean, I can't say that about the U.S. because your guys, I don't know how much they make, and the fringe benefits sometimes are incredible. But here instead, when you think that a premier makes less money than a director of public health, it's a little awkward, right? The president of the company makes less money than one of his directors. Why? How come? What's that? And so those are the things that need to be addressed, right? But movie theaters, if we get back to the movie theater industry, movie theaters are no different than any other industry. When governments make bad decisions, they impact us just as negatively as everybody else's.
Well, I want to talk about a different topic, but it's somewhat political. But we're sticking to movie theaters. You brought up earlier in the discussion, which got me thinking. You said movie theaters are actually very safe. You are socially distanced, and they're very, very safe places. Yet the medical experts came out and said, stay away from movie theaters. What the heck? I mean, here in the United States, this phrase of, support science, trust the science. What science did they tell you as one of the most successful movie entrepreneurs, theater entrepreneurs in the country? What science did they cite to say you need to shut down?
There was no science in our case. In our case, I tell you better than that. We had public health directors come to our theaters, do tests and everything, and their recommendations was to keep movie theaters open. And it's the political body that decided to close them down because they felt they had a few problems. One of them was, how do I make people understand that it's okay to have 200 people in a 400-seat auditorium, distance and whatever, but it's not okay to have 10 people in your home? How do I tell people it's okay to go 200 people in the 400-seat auditorium, but you can't go see your mom in her senior citizen home because right? And because for them to have to explain that, they would have to actually say to people, movie theaters are 28 feet high. Movie theaters actually have better HVAC systems than most of our hospitals and schools do. And movie theaters have this and movie theaters have, and then all of a sudden, they would be almost saying, movie theaters are better run than the government institutions. Oh my God, we can't admit to that, right? And so they forced the theaters to close. The problem was that one of the directors of public health, the highest one in our state or in our province, was called to the National Assembly, which is like our Congress, and he was asked questions under oath. And he asked, and they asked him, said, "Did you ask for the closure of restaurants and theaters?" He says, "No." I said, "Theaters and restaurants should remain open." And so why did they close? The premier said he's the boss. He's the guy who decides. So he's closing them down. So now it's a political decision. So now it's no longer for the well-being of the people, right? And so now there's, claims of damage suits and so forth, so forth. But people need to understand that politicians need to be held accountable. Movie theaters are amongst the safest places. In fact, during the last, so I don't remember, let's put it this way. I'm 50, going to be 53 years old, or 50, no, actually I'm 52. I'm going to be 53 next year. I want to make myself older here. So I'm 52 years old, and in 52 years, I have never had to close a movie theater down to, not operate for 24 hours. Movie theaters are open 365 days a year. So for me, it was like, what the hell? When's the last time this happened? Even during the Spanish flu, most movie theaters were allowed to remain open, which, annihilated a third of the world's population. So you're sitting there and saying, like, guys, what is it that we're doing? And it goes back to that eternal, post I put, which was, only because you can't run your business properly, don't shut mine down. And that's what it is. That's what forced theaters to close.
Well,
it's the
power.
panic.
It's power also.
Right?
It's the public health, the medical people. They finally got the power. I mean, what do they know about a movie theater, running a movie theater business? Or, I mean, what did they even know about the science? They didn't know much about the science, yet they passed it off as scientific. Just like so many of these worthless studies that are coming out about, mothers and fathers, and you're not allowed to. I'm not a father anymore. You're not a father. We're just caretakers and birth people. And there's actually medical research that has come out supporting such things. And I say, look, that's fine. If you want to call it that, that's fine. But you can't pass it off as science. There's nothing scientific about it.
Well, no, but that's the problem, right? It's because people need to understand what the word science means. A lot of people assume science is mathematical. 2 + 2 makes 4. That's it. That's what science is. Only because science says today, artichokes create cancer. And then they further do studies, and then they say, no, we made a mistake. It's not artichokes that create cancer. It's artichokes and people who smoke. Okay. Oh, I understand. And so science is evolving. It evolves. What I know today and what science is gonna know tomorrow are two different things. It will learn, right? It's like an AI learning machine. That's what science is. So at one moment in time, this is what science tells us. But it doesn't mean it's the bulletproof truth, 2 + 2 makes 4. What it just means is, really what science should be saying is, with all of the data and all of the information we have today, this is what we can suppose or conclude. But it's not an ultimate conclusion. It's not the end-all conclusion on this subject, right? Because every one of us has a different DNA. Every one of us reacts differently to stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in many senses, science is nothing else but an accumulation of statistics and of information that you add it together, and with it, you have people who make extrapolations and make conclusions out of things. It doesn't mean that conclusion is the final ultimate thing.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is there was very little science to support shutting down your businesses. I think we can come to that.
Yes, but I would tell you that the real bottom line that everybody should understand from COVID-19 is the following. At the next election, no matter at what level, whether it's municipal, state, provincial, or federal. We need to ask ourselves, who do we want governing our country? Do we want a peacetime politician, a guy who's got a surplus in his budget and he's a bit of a flaky, beautiful, life is all beautiful? Or do we want somebody who's a crisis management expert? Some guy who knows that if we go to war, he knows what to do. That's the decisions we need to take. We need to ask us, why was society created? So that it offered us protection. Great. Who should be the leader of the free world, for example, to make me feel the most protected? Somebody who can actually face adversity. Somebody who can actually not panic under a crisis like COVID-19 and make all kinds of crazy decisions and then change them as we go every other day, right? And today we wear no masks. 3 months later, everybody has to wear a mask. After that, you got to wear maybe a double mask. After that, maybe, well, it's just breathe oxygen and just never leave our houses, right? You're like, come on, guys. Somebody's got to come up with a plan here. And ultimately, that was the biggest problem during COVID-19. The politicians we hired them for competencies that they didn't really have. We never thought we were going to hit a brick wall, and we did. And ultimately, they didn't have a plan. It's very hard to tell people, stay calm, we got this under control, when you don't even have a plan, right? And making a plan means making a commitment, because a plan is a commitment to something. As for if it's going to be like that, it's another story. But that's what a plan is. It's a commitment to a strategy. And there was no commitment from anybody. What I saw, around the world was free for all. It was just like.
Thank you so much for your time, Vince Guzzo. You really had an awesome interview with us. Thanks for hanging around. That's once again Vince Guzzo, serial entrepreneur in Canada, well-known founder and CEO of Cinemas Guzzo, his primary company. The website is mrsunshine.com and also Cinemas Guzzo, Guzzo.com, cinemasguzzo.com. Vince Guzzo, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
No, I think, look, like I said, I think it's important. Let's just keep our eye on the end game. And the end game is that everybody overall, from the smallest person in our community to the top person in our community, has got to live in a better, safer place. And that means electing politicians that will actually know what to do in the face of adversity, and not just, hey, he's got a great hairdo, I should elect him as president of the United States. Come on, guys. Let's elect the right people at the right jobs.
All right. Well, Vince Guzzo, thanks so much for joining us on the Work From Home show. And to all our listeners, as our listeners probably know, look, I'm not saying that the U.S. has the greatest medical system in the world. In fact, you probably heard me. I'm one of the biggest critics that you'll ever listen to about the U.S. medical system. And also, I'm not saying that one certain political party or one certain person did a great job in handling the pandemic. In fact, I think President Trump did an absolutely terrible job, at least on the PR side, of handling the pandemic. Terrible job. And he paid the price for it. He lost the election. So in any case, thanks for joining us on the Work From Home show. Check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions or comments, hello@workfromhomeshow.com is our email address, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Follow us on social media. Leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you use. And until next week, keep on working from home.